Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, hello. My name is Nal, and this is Phyllis, our interview candidate for today. And today we'll be discussing the case of Wen Ho the nuclear physicist that was persecuted on suspicion that he was transferring secret files to the Chinese government. So, Phyllis, today I have three questions for you. Um, as an Asian American in academia, what do you think about like the status of visiting or like international researchers, are they welcomed here in the US?
I think given the current climate, it's definitely not very welcoming to like foreign like scientists in general. I think especially with like the Trump funding cuts and everything. So I think I mean like short answer would be it's definitely not very welcoming to like other researchers.
I see. So, do you know much about the case, the Wen Ho Lee case? Or I can also brief it to you real quick. He was a nuclear physicist at a national laboratory in New Mexico, and he was transferring secret files, but it was protected, not like super confidential, so it's not like top secret, but basically because of his action. And then coincidentally, there was a rumor that there was some Chinese espionage within the national labs. He was immediately framed, and it is due to suspicion that he's Chinese national. That's why. Do you believe that? Um, do you believe that this was the case of racial profiling?
Oh, I think it would. I mean, I don't know much details, but by the way it seems like it because it seems like the moment that China was involved, or like the xenophobia that like US is very xenophobic, especially because China is one of the main competitors. That's why US doesn't really want that, and so that's why the moment that they were like the moment that there was some like secret files transferred, and then the idea that there could be Chinese espionage in the case, they directly linked it together, even though I feel like it might not be fully investigated before they could just like connected the dots together. But I feel like given the uh current climate, it was like because they think that like US government think China's a big threat and that's why they like immediately made the connection. And even though it might not be true, that's like how they interpret it. So it would be some like it is based on like this type of xenophobia and like kind of racial thing that's going on.
Yeah, I agree with your perspective. I think that so many factors like affected how like foreign people in science and academia are viewed in the US today. It's definitely not positive, even though their contributions are overshadowed by their like link to their national origin. And that's just like very broad association that's very unhealthy. One last question for you is that what do you think the lesson to be learned is from this case? Like for different groups, the lesson for government officials or the government for typical laymen that don't know much about science?
I think the
Like,
less
what are some preventative measures, I guess? Yeah.
preventive measures against.
Yeah.
I'm not a policymaker, but I feel like they should probably fully investigate before they jump to a conclusion in general, and then not give off the image that they are. And then I also feel like they should probably, I mean, this is more of like an ideology as a whole, but I think the US really needs to like not be as xenophobic as they are right now. Because I feel like that's like the ideology that's kind of permeating throughout like science and like kind of spilling over to everywhere else as well. About like it's just like kind of not wanting other people to come to this country, even though US is an immigrant country to begin with. So I feel like there is a lot I think for the government policymakers need to ensure that they actually have concrete evidence before jumping to conclusions. Because otherwise they can like any somewhat of like a connection. It'll be like, oh, they're like Chinese spies or there's some sort of other like, I don't know, Iran spies or something like that. I'll just like jump to conclusions and that will definitely harm more people and harm like science efforts in the future. So
Yeah. I have a few like supplementary questions if you don't mind. You get like
okay.
another 5 or 10 minutes. 5 minutes? 5 minutes, yes. Um,
Okay.
I feel like with a not very recent, but very like recent in the past decade example of COVID-19, where Chinese academia was like it's a culprit for like a global pandemic. Do you think that I feel like this case is like very reminiscent of that, where the development, let's say the development of another nation's like scientific achievements, um, m causes fear mongering, and then that leads to like racial profiling, even though like certain members of like certain Chinese scientists are not affiliated with China, the government at all. They're just here for science. Do you think that like the recent in the past few years like xenophobia and xenophobia, um do you think that's linked to this case kind of?
Are we talking COVID-19 or we're talking about
Oh, I'm so sorry. I guess my question was way too long-winded, but basically, like, you think the pattern, there's a pattern how, like, ever since, like, this case, which was in 1999, by the way, so not very long far
oh
ago, and
mhm.
then COVID-19, do you think that it's all, like, a result of, like, a very long, grounded xenophobia sentiment in American society?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also very also linked back to like the Cold War and just like the clash of ideology between like like from like the US like what they think is democratic and then versus like the Chinese Communist Party. So I feel like it has links to that. And there was cases in the past where there were like that was like back in like 1970 there was like a Chinese scientist who was working with like US one of the US like something I don't really know exactly, but
Mm.
then they they wanted to come back to China and the US didn't really want to let them go, but in the end he went to China and helped China develop nuclear weapons. So there are like there has been past cases where it was like I guess like kind of secret stuff was kind of transferred, even though like that person wasn't allowed to take any secret stuff with them, but he kind of went back and helped try and develop. So that was like way back, like probably during the Cold War or something. But I feel like since then, like the sentiment, especially because China's also doing well. If China was doing like as a nation is not doing as well, then I don't think the US will care much because then but because I think it's a perceived threat that China is doing well and in some areas it is surpassing the US and that's why US is very getting very concerned. And because it's not just linked to like any racial stuff, it's also linked to like geopolitical influence and linked to like how like basically like yeah power and influence around the globe in general and then also science is like a crucial part of like maintaining like the like US technological superiority and hegemony and that's why it's they really like that's why US is really like kind of being like very like in one sense kind of racist and xenophobic in this area because the perceived threat that China's going to do better than the US.
Yeah, I feel like this is also linked to the model minority myth. It's like with the rise of China's like young-minded talents, I feel like also a lot of Asian Americans in the US also feel like a pressure to do just as well because like their home country is growing, so why not them as well? And then this just like leads to a whole spiral of racial profiling, which I
Mhm.
hope there will be some remedy. There certainly has been with like organizations, but awareness will never be full coverage, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, but yeah, thank you, Phyllis, today for joining an interview. I really appreciate your perspective. It was very insightful and it really brought in my mind. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for interviewing.
Of course.